Buckle up, everyone. It's time for some pain. Welcome to the post-Indie-ween world. It's cold, bleak, and surprisingly more spooky despite most of these games not being of the horror genre. Dark forces are at play here as I'm forced to make this video because you know what, Avengers had it coming anyway. Without getting too into it, since I don't want to become one of those channels, I think that the superhero craze has now run its course and we've hit that point where superhero fatigue has actually set in this time around. Which I wouldn't be surprised if what did this for us was that big gap in releases thanks to the Rona allowing everyone to have a collective break and realize, yeah, you know, I think I've had my fill of these, since we stopped having these movies shoved in front of us every 2 or 3 months with no time to react or think about if we actually want this. This is all immaterial though, as Marvel's Avengers is the first AAA cape game we've been presented with in a good while, and really the first game focusing on the Avengers we've had in, well, I honestly can't think of another Avengers video game at the moment, and it just sucks. It's aggressively asinine, and its major gameplay features are all cribbed from other, more popular games from about 5 years ago, and it manages to do all of the things worse than where the Avengers got them from. That's not the big reason why I think Marvel's Avengers is the worst thing to happen to video games in 2020 so far. You always have to say so far with stuff in 2020 because this really is the year of the bottom repeatedly falling out. So after a nominal amount of fanfare, that Avengers game that we all heard about a few years back, which we were briefly interested in when the gameplay got leaked during some con, was finally released into some rather shocking reviews. It was bad. It was that kind of bad where it hurt because you honestly were expecting something good to come from this given the circumstances. It was being developed by a big name publisher that was having their A-teams work on the game to the point that other big games were put on the shelf, aka canceled in all but name, to make sure that there was no shortage in manpower or skill to develop this game. And the Avengers is an enormous intellectual property, not something you make shovelware garbage out of. This game doesn't have an original bone in its body, and it was released in an extremely unpolished state. Avengers presently sits at an aggregate middle C on all platforms, and while most reviews have something nice to say about the game, usually the riveting story, but after I got through said story, I'm starting to think that maybe that's more of a read between the lines of them asking Squeenix to please keep sending us advanced review copies. We like your big expensive game. Now, I don't want to deny anyone their right to their own opinion or say that an opinion is inherently biased by an outside malevolent force, but maybe we played entirely different stories, or perhaps it gets good post-main game and the stuff that you have to grind like 100 hours to get to, but I'm not seeing whatever these people that say they like the story saw. The big insult to injury here is that while this game was designed to be a multiplayer experience with new content continuously coming to keep the player base, said player base has fallen right off a cliff. According to Steam charts, as I write this down in my script, Marvel's Avengers is down 6,000% from launch, and while drop-off is normally expected immediately after your launch, I went and checked to find that Marvel's Avengers is only doing slightly better than 2018's actual dumpster fire Radical Heights, the extreme early access game that launched with entire buildings and city blocks in its world map without textures or props in them. Actually, come to think of it, Marvel's Avengers fell a lot more in proportion to Radical Heights, so if anything, maybe if Radical Heights had the level of hype and advertisement that Avengers had, Radical Heights would be doing better than this thing. The kicker here is that the other day I saw an article saying that one of the titles that one of Avengers developers, Eidos Montreal, made back in 2016 was currently doing better numbers than their newly released big budget Avengers game despite it being a single player game. I bet you all can guess which game it was. Yep. 4 years after the fact, Deus Ex Mankind Divided is still doing numbers. This is what spurred me to make this video. I am a huge fan of the Deus Ex series, and as you might already be aware, the third and final game in the prequel trilogy for Deus Ex was shelved, and Eidos Montreal, the studio that was made to make Deus Ex games and other immersive sims, was pulled away from the series to work on this. I'm at an actual loss for words at the moment based on these circumstances. I think it's only fair that since Marvel's Avengers had a hand in canceling the final part of the Deus Ex prequel series, we hold Marvel's Avengers to the same critical standard as the original Deus Ex, which is literally the best PC game of all time because that's what we got cut off from. Prepare yourselves for a proper smackdown, boyos. So let's get introduced to the pain. So let's talk about the core gameplay for a bit. The short version is that it's repetitive garbage where nearly all the characters play essentially the same as the game rips off features from other major success stories in the gaming industry over the last 5 years without making any effort to understand why those features worked in those games and why they don't work here. Nearly all the maps are functionally identical to the point where I eventually didn't need to use my little radar thing to figure out where all the hidden treasures were going to be, since heaven forbid we let the map designers design more than one map. And to give you an idea of the general repetitiveness of the Avengers game, let's talk about our cast of Avengers we'll be playing as. The first Avenger you'll be playing as outside of the tutorial is Reddit bait Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel is supposed to be some sort of self-insert for somebody and is one of the Inhumans. Her abilities include polymorphing her body parts to punch things, use a ranged attack, and swinging from conveniently placed overhanging bars. And while she cannot overtly fly, she can air juggle baddies almost indefinitely, which can get you pretty much wherever you need to be with a little bit of creativity. Miss Marvel is one of the only characters that has a genuinely unique ability in the fact that her primary special ability is a group heal. So congratulations, Kamala, you're on healer duty, and if we wipe even once at Kara, it is entirely your fault and you are kicked from the guild. She also has a forward thrust attack. You can also press and hold a button during normal combat to make her essentially invincible for a bit, and her ultimate is to get really big for a second. Next, you get the Hulk, who is voiced by Troy Baker, which essentially tells you all you need to know about his characterization in this iteration of the Avengers. Hulk's abilities include punching things really hard, and when that doesn't work, he can throw stuff. The Hulk has an ability where if you hold down a button for a little bit during general combat, you'll be invincible for a little while. He has the forward thrust attack, and while he cannot fly, he can literally bounce off the walls and air juggle enemies indefinitely. Hulk's ultimate is, I think it was an AoE attack, but that's also what his primary ability is, so I could have that mixed up. They wouldn't just repurpose the same kind of ability by giving it slightly different effects, would they? Wait, I went back and checked my footage, and yeah, both his primary special and his ultimate are the same. Both Bone Shaker and his ultimate are AoE attacks, except one gives you a defensive buff and the other just does a crap ton of damage. After Hulk comes Iron Man, who somehow has even more edges sanded off his character than the Disney version of Iron Man had. Iron Man actually can fly, however, a child throwing a small stone can knock him out of the air, and we forgot how to do air recoveries back in the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction, back when non-Spider-Man Marvel games were still fun. Back to Tony though, he has a melee and range attacks which require ammo, a primary ability that lets him ignore his ammo needs for a bit, and a secondary ability that's a forward thrust attack. And his ultimate is to get really big for a second. You're probably going to play as Iron Man a lot in the early to mid game once you unlock him, since being able to fly allows you to skip most of the filler in levels where instead of walking around you can just speed fly all the way to the objective. After Iron Man comes Black Widow. Her basic abilities include using an array of gadgets to punch things, a ranged attack with guns, and to swing across conveniently overhanging objects. Black Widow can't fly, but just like everyone else, she can indefinitely air juggle enemies with enough creativity. Her special abilities include an AoE cloaking bomb that can be used only right after Hulk has popped his aggro ability, a forward thrust attack, and the uncanny ability to always have her spandex-clad butt perfectly framed by the camera whenever she's in a cutscene. Oh, and her violence sticks turn red too if you fill the violence meter. Second to last is Thor. Thor is the closest thing to a unique character in this game based on the mechanics of his hammer and how he deals quote-unquote Odin force damage. Thor is the only character I really had fun with thanks to all the creative violence you can do with his hammer, and how, even though it's unintended, you can sort of do air recoveries with Thor if you get hit mid-air based on how his flight mechanics work. Whereas Iron Man has to actively jump and then activate flight, Thor just sort of floats off into the air. This can be a pain when trying to do any sort of ground-based dodging, because you'll just accidentally float a bit into the air instead of vaulting an enemy, but if you can draw basic inferences, you already know that Thor's special attacks are, and his ultimate is he T-poses to assert dominance and then teleports a few feet away after killing the game's frame rate. Finally, we have Captain America who... screw it, you figured out that all these characters are pretty much the same with some very minor differences. By the time I got to Cap in-game, I couldn't be bothered to play as him except for when the game made me play as him. The few unique abilities that characters have don't synergize very well with one another, except for Miss Marvel's mass heal, which you honestly could not possibly screw up, and I think they only gave it to her to give people a reason to play as her after they unlocked other characters. The mass cloak for a rogue type of character like Black Widow doesn't make sense either, as maybe she and Captain America are the only ones that really need to make a speedy getaway based on their abilities, whereas Hulk actively needs to court as much aggro as he can get, and Thor, Iron Man, and Miss Marvel all don't need emergency stealth, so they have their own get-out-of-trouble-free cards. You know what else is essentially identical to every other time you do it in this game? The missions. Like I mentioned earlier, missions in Avengers are so samey that I stopped needing the tracker to find out where things were. Now, there are a handful of unique maps, like whenever a character was either introduced or when you did an iconic mission where you only could play as that character, and even then, iconic missions were only unique some of the time. 90% of the time in Marvel's Avengers, you're going to start in a large, seemingly open area where there are a couple of small offshoots to go and get a thing, but otherwise it's a straight shot to the objective where you might fight one or two groups of baddies along the way before someone has to press a button or something and you get instanced into an even more linear area where a morsel of the plot happens, and then you have to fight through a few more waves of enemies while you do some sort of thing. The specific thing changes from time to time, but you'll know what you'll need to do to accomplish that thing because it's always going to be roughly the same. So I've said a couple times now that Marvel's Avengers cribs essentially all of its gameplay elements from popular games over the last 5 years and implements them poorly at best. We're gonna go down the line here, and by the time we're done, we'll have covered just about everything there is in Marvel's Avengers gameplay-wise, where it comes from, and how the Avengers version of it is a poor knockoff that they wouldn't even put on a blanket somewhere at a swap meet. Exhibit A. Hoarding colorful gear, 95% of which is inconsequential resource fodder, and the rest will be useless after a couple of missions. While a lot of games do this, I get the feeling that the Avengers gear system was primarily modeled off Destiny. Like Destiny, gear score seems to take precedent over level, and all leveling up seems to do is get your Avengers ability unlocks that say give you a new combo or a minor side grade to one of your attacks. Missions in Avengers are labeled by quote-unquote force strength, which is gear score in all but name. The majority of your time managing gear will be spent when you get a notification telling you that you have better gear available to you, so just like that one tweet went around, you just hold the trigger button to equip the best gear in your inventory, and then you take about a minute and a half to scrap everything else you've got before dumping mats into the new stuff to slightly upgrade it. And then maybe that new gear that you had to put on will last 1, maybe 2 levels before you have to do this all over again. One of the best parts about equipping gear is comparing gear to one another and going over each item to see what benefits you get with equipping this new piece of gear, and if there's a set bonus you can work towards. Auto-equip is just going through the motions of a gear system that has no soul. Like, if you're gonna just say, okay, equip this, that, and the other thing, don't think about it now. Just add all these stat boosts into leveling up and leave the gear alone. There's no cosmetic changes for equipping any new gear either, because we gotta grind for them extra special premium skins, which, oh lord, we're gonna get to those in a few. That's the best part about finding new gear though. Seeing how cool you can make yourself look while boosting your stats. Equipping gear feels like busy work here, meant to pad out the game time, and I never really felt like I was actually improving my character that I was playing as. Oh, and by the way, nothing quite brings the momentum of a mission, particularly the final mission in this game, to a grinding halt like having to stop everything you're doing because your inventory is literally full of grays and greens and you gotta go scrap them so you can pick up more stuff. Oh, and while we're at it, Avengers also cribs pointless dailies from Destiny 2 and other MMO type games, except they're even more meaningless here. You can just literally take all of them from the quest giver and you'll get them done by the end of the night without even trying. There's no mental effort in deciding if you need to pick something up or if you can do something or if it's even a good idea to take this quest. But even after you somehow just get all these little dailies done through the course of 2 or 3 missions, you're going to need an obscene amount of rep grinding in order to get anything good from the faction stores, and by the time you get to that point, you'll probably have already found something better than said item out in the field. Next comes pointless wandering about to find chests full of gear and resources a la Assassin's Creed. Every mission has a couple of obvious offshoots that have a whole lot of nothing in them except for an area where there'll be a couple chests and crates of raw materials that you're going to need for crafting if you want your gear to still work. It isn't even really a reward for exploration since you won't even actually need to explore to find this stuff. It's pointed out to you every time you press the up button on the D-pad, and none of them are really hidden. It's just busy work that adds maybe another 5 minutes of extra playtime to each mission, while you make sure you've got enough stuff to hold X to upgrade your gear with because the game told you to do it. While Assassin's Creed has flirted with being one of the most asinine franchises in gaming over the years to the point where eventually Ubisoft had to rework how they developed the games, Marvel's Avengers somehow takes the asinine levels up to 11. There's no searching for chests hidden on rooftops or squirreled away in hard to notice places. There's no meaningful loot in any of these chests thanks to all the gear being useless by the time you're 2 missions deep from picking it up. It's just a chore. Congratulations, Eidos. You've out Assassin's Creeded Assassin's Creed. I'm sure everyone at Crystal Dynamics is so proud of this mindless busywork exploration. However, the pride in the work will be discussed later in the video. Next comes general combat, which I think they're trying to emulate that free-flowing combat made popular by the Batman Arkham series, Shadow of Mordor, and the real ones who made Hand of Fate. Which, by the way, did you know that for the price of Marvel's Avengers, you could buy the complete Hand of Fate collection including both games, the soundtrack, and all DLCs available, and you would have a much better time than playing Marvel's Avengers. But anyway, in Avengers, you sort of move around like you would in one of those better games, and while your abilities are on cooldown, you will be primarily using light attack, heavy attack, counter, and occasionally things like dodge and vault. But it feels more like a clunky beat 'em up than a free-flowing combat, and the only reason I compare it is because I think the game's trying to do this because it keeps on causing me to go over and fight another enemy that I was not focusing on, and you end up jumping around and just awkwardly getting smacked by everyone unless you get really good at the dodge system. It's a nightmare as you wrestle the camera while trying to figure out where the auto target is going to target you next, and why is the auto target on again? You thought you turned that off? By the way, while I'm talking about it, the lock-on system or auto target, whatever you want to call it, in this game is an absolute mess. It never holds the camera where you want it to, and it will just randomly swan off to another enemy while you're trying to focus down something that actually poses a threat to you. But that's more for the jank portion of this video. Then, whenever you're not in a mission, you're awkwardly hobbling around the Normandy or the Chimera in a very Mass Effect-like fashion, where you can go around and talk to major characters out of combat and try to learn about them and their take on the current situation. But where Mass Effect gave you actual insight into the characters on your ship and how they feel about everything. And despite this being a AAA game with the voice acting A-list for video games voicing all the characters, the majority of the stuff you can get in these snippets on the Chimera or the other hub location, the Anthill, feels like it's on the level of an Oblivion quest giver, which is acceptable in the Elder Scrolls Oblivion because there's like hundreds of characters to do dialogue for, whereas Avengers has maybe like a dozen important characters to talk to in-game if we're counting faction merchants, and doubling down on this, it's a shameful display that while in their prime BioWare had to build an entire universe from the ground up and try to make all the characters interesting of their own volition, this is a Marvel title. Most of the characters in this game can be traced back to the beginning of the Silver Age, save for Captain America, who is one of the few hero holdovers from the original Golden Age of comic books. That means that nearly everyone that you can talk to in this game has at least 50 to 60 years of written history to draw from for these characters, but at times it feels like the only background they did for these characters was watch a few movies the other night and then maybe look at a popular comic panel or two that floats around the internet. I'm guessing the latter is the case because a young Kamala quote drops the "No you move" speech, which heavily implies that the Civil War happened in this universe, which would also mean a lot of stuff like the Dark Avengers and maybe even the Siege of Asgard happened in this universe. But whatever, let's just make the tween use Cap's favorite Mark Twain quote because they used it in the movie too. Just to double down on the likelihood that the people writing this game probably did a lot more movie watching than comic book reading before all of this was made, one of the side quests in the game has Thor going after an imposter Thor out in Scandinavia. And if you've read Civil War or any of the other comics around that time, you might have a cool idea of where that's going. But nope, it's just Loki, because Ragnarok wasn't in the movies. Just to loop everyone else in here, during the Civil War in the comics, which was a lot more intense than the movie, but there were certain intellectual properties Disney just didn't have in order to make that happen. Thor is dead, but not really dead because this is comics and no one ever actually dies because sales will eventually dip without their presence. You get the idea. So Tony Stark decides to use a little bit of Thor's hair to make a clone of Thor, and then also makes him an artificial Mjolnir. This Thor clone is called Ragnarok, and eventually it goes rogue and violence ensues. And this could have worked perfectly in the Marvel's Avengers video game plot because one of the people to work on this Thor clone was AIM. Now, to wrap all of this up, ironically, one of the only major series from the last 5 years that Marvel's Avengers doesn't crib from is the Deus Ex series. Never mind that the team that made the more recent Deus Ex games is literally working on this game too. Never mind that a Deus Ex-styled upgrade system might have been worlds better than what we got in Marvel's Avengers. Never mind that some of the best level designers of the last 10 years are on your team, but nope! You gotta make them build all of this crap instead of interesting layouts, because heaven forbid the focus group player has to spend more than half a second planning their route of attack when going to a new level in game. And that's it. That's basically the whole core gameplay loop. There is post-story stuff, but out of all the post-story stuff I've seen, this has got to be the most bland, boilerplate, boring stuff I've seen in a video game in a very long time. It's all basically the same deal as the story missions you had that kinda, but sorta not really, got away with just being vehicles for the plot, but now all that plot is stripped out, so it's just endless busy work while you grind for gear so that you can do harder busy work missions to grind for more gear. A lot of these late game missions will require a power level of 40. As a point of reference, when I started the final mission of the campaign, I was at a power level in the mid-teens after about 14 hours of play while doing all the side missions I could that were presented to me. I get a feeling that this is part of the obscene grind to get people playing for minor morsels of story, as each character has an iconic mission chain, which is actually just 2 missions and the training level, where once you do the first one, I honest to God thought there was only one for a while till I looked on the wikis, and then I found out that you have to do crazy, stupid amounts of goal-based grinding in missions to unlock the second half of each character's iconic mission and their costume. And I gotta be honest, after looking into it, there is nothing you would not gain that would be more satisfying than just watching the cutscenes of the mission on YouTube. In fact, as a point of reference, don't actually play it if you've already bought these games. I believe MK Ice and Fire already has all the iconic mission chains up on YouTube already for you to view. And I want to thank him or her for that. I actually don't know who they are, because you have potentially saved hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of hours of their life by putting in the work. Because based on the cutscenes and story bits that I saw post-game in those iconic missions, it is absolutely not worth it to do any of that grinding if that was the prize at the end. I don't know if anyone actually did grind all the way to the power level 40 and above for those extra special missions, but if by chance there was someone who did and you're watching this, who hurt you? But what about all those super cool endgame cosmetics that you gotta grind to level 40 to get the materials for in the fabricator? I hear you say as you furiously polish your Funko Pops in the background and strategically arrange your comic books on your wall as you're about to film a vlog post about this video. Nope. They're all terrible and an insult to all the cool stuff they could have drawn from in the comics. All these skins are on par with skin swaps you could get when Overwatch first launched. There's 1 or 2 unique models, but everything else is just a blatant palette swap on the models they already had. And the insult to injury here is where they could have at least done something that vaguely acknowledges all the variants heroes have had, say maybe a Red Hulk skin or Bucky cap, or being able to play as Beta Ray Bill instead of Thor. Nope. We're just gonna have 5 different skins of Thor in a really tight t-shirt, because that's a lot easier to graft on those Intel, Verizon, and other sponsored skins that we're contractually obligated to provide for our overlords later on. And before you say, that isn't canon in Avengers, there's like 80 years of canon for some of these dudes like Cap. Everyone has teamed up with each other, been sworn enemies with each other, died, resurrected, swapped genders, and was briefly bonded to the Venom symbiote for a limited run series. Marvel's continuity has reached SCP and 40K levels of how everything must be and not be canon at the same time if the story is going to work, because there is simply too much canon to keep track of. And moreover, this is an offshoot video game. They can do whatever they want. And part of the fun of playing a video game is that you get to have all the cool fun what-if skins that don't have to worry about comic continuity. Like, hey, remember that Spider-Man game for like the PS1 and everything else? Like that, back when video games were fun. But don't ask questions about why we do that now. Just consume the product and get excited for the new product and its DLC. And circling back to the topic of endless grind, I'd be missed if I did not bring up how this game does not respect your time. You can never play just one mission, and the story will almost always jump into a second part of a mission that you just played, requiring a new set of loading screens and another 30 to 45 minutes of doing exactly what you were just doing to get another 2 minutes of story time. I hate this. I genuinely hate this. I'd be winding down for the night and figure, okay, I've got just enough time for one more mission so I can get a little closer to being done with this game, but almost every time there'd be some contrivance that required me to do the next mission right now, and I'd have to like do it because you're not even allowed to quit out of the mission I was already on, because screw anyone that has some sort of obligations or a schedule to keep, right? Now let me tell you the story of pain. Now, I've already said my piece on why a bunch of people said they liked the story, yet very few of them give any concrete examples about why they liked it. So let's talk about why I think that this game's story makes Liefield's writing look like F. Scott Fitzgerald. Everything happens in such a safe, predictable manner that it's like being on a Disneyland dark ride, except you don't even get to see the little hints of something more going on behind the scenes of what you're immediately seeing. Nobody's on the Mylar table just out of your view in Avengers, and it's entirely predictable from start to finish. Everything happens exactly as you think it would happen, and in the most uncomplicated way possible. The plot unfolds as if it's a summary of what a more interesting plot might have been, and the obvious red herring is obvious, and none of the characters we play as grow or develop in any meaningful way throughout the 14 hours it took for me to get from the intro to the end credits. Who knows though? Maybe the people behind the writing of this game weren't actually allowed to make any meaningful choices with the characters or do anything other than a base template of each of the Avengers, because Mickey Mouse was breathing down their neck, making sure that nobody did anything to jeopardize any of their intellectual property's images in order to hinder phase like 17 or whatever we're on by now. And again, this burns me up not so much because I'm a hardcore comic book fanboy, but full disclosure, I used to be a big fan of all things comic book up until about 2013, where I just got sick of copy and paste arcs, killing off main characters to drive sales, but immediately bringing them back when sales started to slump. And all the people screaming bloody murder about comics getting political, like that has never happened before. But because you have the people behind the Deus Ex games on this team that made the game, and while that's not the be-all end-all of good storytelling in a video game, it's still pretty damn good. Now, to delve a little deeper on those characters, despite being the safest possible version of the Avengers, who never do anything that might be hard on their image or to the player, none of these characters are ever particularly likable in this iteration. Ms. Marvel is annoying, and despite being faced with the realities of being a superpower defender of the common good, she still has the same mindset of when she was like 12 or something. But you can be a perky optimist while being aware of how the real world works, but not here. Hulk is okay, but Dr. Banner is just a mopey Troy Baker. Iron Man, Black Widow, and Cap feel like literal boilerplate versions of the characters who they aspire to be, and maybe have about half as much wit as their Disneyverse counterparts, but eat it hard on the first hurdles. Thor is... okay, screw it. It's the same as all the others. I'm just disappointed in Thor's questline, especially because they had a bunch of cool stuff, but they went for the Loki cop-out. And actually, no, making that statement about Thor is redundant because all the characters' iconic questlines are like that. It's like the writers glossed over the Avengers wiki pages before doing this. I'm at a genuine loss. Like, I just know, how do you give such little effort on something so big and so storied that so much was given up for? And this is what you give them. I just don't get it. Alright, back to the script I actually wrote. It doesn't help that everyone is either over or under acting just about all the time. To crib a phrase from another comic book piece of media, no one is ever adequately whelmed. I don't blame this on any of the voice actors though, because video game development is infamous for its cartoonishly obscene levels of secrecy around the plot details, and also for general bad directing of acting talent. There's also, like how I've been harping for the last geez, this video is almost 30 minutes deep. Some of these characters have been around for 60 plus years, and there have been a lot of interpretations of these characters in that span of time. There's no quintessential way to play any of the Avengers, but I guess everyone just sort of went for default settings to be safe. Now, I said it earlier and I said it again. Part of me feels like a good number of the reviews said that they liked the story just because they were looking for something nice to say. A number of these reviews straight up give a 5th grade level book report of the plot and say that's why they like the story. Although I will commend Robert Zach of PC Gamer, who actually did a very good job of explaining what he liked about the story. So kudos to him, good on you for actually defending your opinions and convincing me why. Otherwise, there's a lot of big, please keep sending us advanced review copies energy and a lot of book reporting. I think I can kind of see where this is coming from, given the pedigree of a major production company that owns studios creating some of the biggest franchises in all of gaming, making an official video game about one of the biggest geek culture properties, period, coming off as being an untouchable. So maybe they thought they'd better have something nice to say, or maybe people have just been so battered by having to review comic book related content and the comic book nerd rage whenever you say something that's anything less than blind praise that people are just phoning it in. I don't know each and every individual person, I don't know their case, but after I experienced the story and then saw what a lot of the people reviewing the game said about the story, I just don't know. I'll admit that one of the things I did enjoy about Avengers storyline was Kamala's dad. He's just an average schmo and a loving father who's taking time off work after he discovered that his little girl has an AO3 account so he can take his daughter to meet the Avengers so they can give her a good talking to about the dangers of writing the slash. Jeez, this poor guy doesn't even have time to change out of his office attire over the course of 6 years. Abu is the real hero of this game, and it's a crying shame that he hardly gets any screen time. Taste the pain. Okay, it's time for the monthly cooking segment. However, this is not something I would recommend you try, as I am concocting this to dull the pain talking about this game brings me, and it's very likely that this beverage will be the thing that pushes me over the event horizon into oblivion. But anything is better than existing in a reality where Deus Ex got canceled for this crap. That's right, I'm reverse engineering the Red Lobster Dew-Garl-rita and making it as cursed as possible for your entertainment. When I saw this on my Instagram feed scrolling through, I thought it was a joke, but then I googled it and it turns out it's real. There's even some actual people that tried to make this for like real. Only in 2020, I guess. So first order of business was to figure out how they might have done it, and I just figured they probably replaced agave syrup with concentrated dew. So I looked into that, and it turns out you can buy dew syrup from like a soda tap thing, but you need a special tap to buy too, and it only comes in 5-gallon crates at 5 times concentration, and that would cost me $200 after shipping and handling. Screw that, we can do better. A 2-liter of dew is less than $2 over at Wally's Sweatshop Emporium, so we're gonna take a 2-liter bottle of that gamer juice, dump it into a saucepan, and boil that sucker down for about 3 hours. You heard me right, we're boiling down Mountain Dew in order to get refined gamer essence for our cocktail. The end result tasted very dewy, but it also looked like extremely dehydrated urine, so I had to add a couple of drops of green food dye, which will make it very undew-like dark green, but that's gonna be okay because we're gonna mix it in with everything, so it ought to be good. Also, since I did this ahead of time and stuck it in the fridge for later assembly, I had to reheat the boiled down dew in the microwave to get it all loose and syrupy again. So that's an extremely cursed thing. This stuff is about a 12-to-1 reduction, so it's thick, really thick. Now we're gonna assemble this like a normal margarita, so that means tequila, triple sec, lime juice, even though dew is already lemon lime flavor to begin with, and gamer blood all go over a tray of ice and into the blender and hit that pulverize button on the sucker until it's vaguely smooth. I actually do have this nice little ice crusher I got as a wedding gift, but this is faster and it also blends the ingredients. Okay, so this actually tastes not terrible. I can see why you might sell it to discerning clients at your chain restaurant, but it's clearly not for me. I think I'm missing something here though. Oh right, the garnish around the glass. So let me see, how should I do this? Well, the perfect gamer snack is Doritos, so I'm gonna crush up some Doritos and roll it around the glass for a garnish. Yeah, that's salty enough. This is a good start, and as you can see here, it causes me a great deal of pain, but it's still not cursed enough. You know, I initially misread this in my feed as a Dew-Garl-rita. So you know what? We're doing that. Apply the violence to the garlic bulbs to peel them, and then toss them in with a blender with a few of those intact Doritos to give it that extra gamer taste. It's not good, honey. Yep, that is the taste that gamers crave. G Fuel better just pack it up or start employing me to make their beverages from now on. But you know what? We can be even more cursed. I went and bought a 12-pack of Mountain Dew Code Red, and after trying one of the cans to remember what it tasted like, I poured the other 11 into a saucepan, and we're starting the process all over again. I know that some of you unironically like my cooking, but this isn't Binging with Babish, nor is it Joshua Weissman where we make it better. Here on Cooking with Charl, we make it cursed. So once that sacred potion is done boiling down, this actually has a chance to be good, as cherry limeade is certainly a thing, and this will essentially be a cherry limeade margarita. Welp, here goes. Okay, so it's not poison and it is kinda tasty, but it's so sweet that it makes my teeth hurt with every sip. I tried finishing this later on after I got pictures of it, but after about 4 or 5 sips, I just had to toss it. And you know what? This video still needs to be more cursed, so we're gonna take our slop bucket and gulp it down for maximum cursitude, and then we're gonna finish up the video. Now guys, I know this elixir has the opportunity to change me into the worst of all gamer kind, so just in case that happens, I want you to know that I enjoyed our time together, and please, whatever I become, remember me for what I was before this and before becoming the most epic gamer there ever is. Crap, this stuff actually might make me good at Doom Eternal. So back to the train wreck at hand. This game is a lot of jank for something that came from multiple AAA studios. Now, I understand that day one hiccups are a thing, but I got my playthrough for footage purposes in about a month after launch, so there's little excuse for that stuff. Yes, I'm aware that they recently finally started patching things like the ability to move faster than an awkward hobble on the Chimera, and they added a terminal in that other place I literally only went to when the story demanded it, so you can pick up all your previously mentioned meaningless faction dailies, and apparently they're working hard to add in the hot new characters, Girl Hawkeye and Hawkeye, in order to get people to come back, because yeah, Hawkeye sounds like a real crowd pleaser and totally better than, say, fixing all the jank that already exists in the game and adding more content. First example of jank. For some reason, they decided to get Michael Bay cinematographer to do all the cutscenes in the game. The camera is never not shaking or moving around to convey big action, or maybe they just place scenes in certain places where the auto camera just doesn't know what to do with itself. And all the cutscenes, from the preface before they do the big final battle to the Avengers just asking each other how their days were when they're on the Chimera, it's always shaking and moving around, and it's really hard to focus on, and it's just so unsettling at times. But that's not the worst part. The shaky cam persists into general gameplay, and whenever I use a controller or a keyboard or anything I can think of, the toughest enemy in this game by far is the camera. Nothing can stop it, and you will die a lot to it because it decided to pan away from where you need to latch onto a thing to make a big jump, or it whips around to some random lower level enemy right as you need to dodge a would-be killing blow from a big enemy, and it just never stops, targeted or not. It just whips around willy-nilly, making it very hard to focus on anything. It's bad enough that I have to wrestle with this camera on top of trying to wrestle down the sponge of the enemies. Then there's how this game just craps out during more intense moments of play. Now, just to make sure it wasn't an issue on my end, I made sure that my game was set to the optimal settings according to GeForce, and that my PC specs are well above the recommended. On top of all the frame drops, I got a lot of straight up rubber banding in the middle of single player because the servers need to know what I'm doing at all times, whether or not I'm actually playing with other people online. And the player base has already fallen off a cliff, so by the time I did start trying to play online, it certainly wasn't lagging because a ton of people were all tugging on the same server. I get that you want to show off all your super cool particle effects and big crazy robot models, but remember that all engines have their limitations, and maybe some of this stuff would have been better as a pre-rendered cutscene if even the more high-end PCs are having trouble with it. And if that wasn't enough, this game takes its sweet time loading itself in, since there's so much more to load between the 75 and 110 gigs in required space according to the specifications page. There's no going for that SSD either. Who do you think you are, Avengers? Call of Duty? You're going to be spending a lot of time waiting for things to load, only for it to chug a lot as the mission finally launches. At least that gives you plenty of time to go for a bathroom break or refill your drink between missions or between instances of missions. So that's one thing the game has going for it, I guess. Then there's an entire hive of little bugs and hiccups all over over the place. Nothing huge, just mostly clipping issues and the AI forgetting what it's supposed to be doing. And a lot of time the animations will never line up quite right, so when you interact with things or you do a finisher, your hero will awkwardly slide in place halfway through the animation and still not quite line up with the terminal. Speaking of things that don't quite line up, I'd be missed if I don't mention how Marvel's Avengers has some of the most unintuitive menu prompts I've ever seen. The big example that tripped me up every time is that the button you press to pause the game is not the same button you press to unpause it, so that goes against all my gamer knowledge in this, 26 years I've been on this earth? It just kept on tabbing over instead of pausing, and I had to look at the controls again. I don't know if I'm being a big fat dummy pants here, but everything just made zero sense menuing, and also it's a big hot mess in the equipment menu, as whether you're using the controller or the arrow keys or a D-pad, you're always gonna have to fiddle around to get to the part of the gear you want to manage because it keeps on jumping over to other tabs of gear. So sometimes getting rid of all my junk gear was a chore in and of itself. This all culminates in a final level that is a hot mess, which included a load of animation glitches, audio bugs, and a few soft blocks where I had to just die in order to progress the game because something didn't prompt properly. It almost feels like the team might have ran out of time and wasn't able to properly QA test the last sequence of the game, which just how much crap is going on here. Share the pain with others so that they might understand it too. If there is one silver lining here, it's that if there was ever a game to make the usual suspects stop crying about how games as a service is going to destroy the industry, it'd be Marvel's Avengers. This is a perfect example to show every suit with an NBA and NBA season tickets that games as a service doesn't work if you front load it, and only certain games can really sustain that kind of model. Don't slap it on everything in sight. It was already pretty quiet back when I was playing a month into launch, and when I checked again as I'm writing and recording this video, it seems that Marvel's Avengers can now only break 1,000 peak concurrent players on the weekends. And it takes a good minute to get connected, and there's plenty of time to think, do I really want to play with puppies right now? This game is bad enough without someone clipping their mic to tell me what kind of slur I am because I didn't carry their saggy butts through a mission. The prospect of playing multiplayer here makes me ask, why can't the AI do any of this stuff? As the AI is only really good for holding the attention of a few lesser bad guys and maybe reviving other downed AI every now and again. I know they recently patched it to make the AI slightly more useful, aka prioritize you if you get downed, but why can't the AI play objectives? I ended up getting stuck in a boss fight for a while since I couldn't get it through my thick skull that those things that popped up on its back are the new weak points on this giant robot, and I need to hit them even though they made no indication that that was the thing I needed to hit. And I assumed that it wasn't something I needed to hit because unlike the vents that popped up all over the place, none of my AI partners went for these new weak points, and they all just sort of stood right at the feet of the monster and kept on getting downed and reviving each other and attacking its invincible face in vain. If they could be bothered to play objectives for the story in Marvel's Avengers, the game's story would probably be 3 to 4 hours shorter since you don't have to do it all by yourself. Knowing the caliber of devs involved in this production of this game, I can't help but don a tinfoil hat and think that maybe the AI was intentionally made just a bit incompetent in order to get people to play the multiplayer version of the game to try and sink them in deeper. So how about a big fat no to that? So here's the part in the video I've done before, but it bears repeating because people keep trying to bring it up. But it's more fun with friends. Well, I'll have to take your word for it because lately I don't really have any of those because I moved across the country and we're in the middle of a pandemic, so not much socializing going on. But everything is fun with friends, from what I remember anyway. When I was a teenager, we'd hang out in clearings just off the trails or in literal drainage gutters because it was fun because it was just you and the boys hanging out. Also in hindsight, Aliso Viejo had some world-class trails with lots of little offshoots for kids that were up to no good to make trouble in. We had it too good back in the day. Anything is more fun when you're doing it with your friends. Jury duty, digging a latrine, taxes. All are considerably better though when you're doing it with friends as opposed to being forced to do it alone or with strangers. Stop trying to make this point. A game should be entertaining enough on its own or when you're playing it with strangers to carry the experience, and then be even better when you're playing with people whose company you actually enjoy. It shouldn't just be fun with friends, but then it's a crap time on your own. No, don't do this. I just want the pain to stop. So after the however so many minutes of the video we're in right now, you might be asking me, why do you care so much about this dumpster fire of a video game? We get it. it's bad. But didn't you, by your own admission, stop caring about the subject matter 7 years ago? Well, the latter is indeed true, and while I have gone on record as hating literally anything Disney thanks to being a born and raised OC boy, that's not why I'm mad. I'm mad because the final chapter of Deus Ex got canceled to make this fucking atrocity. That's how mad I am. I intentionally try to never swear on this channel, but I just dropped an F-bomb. Squeenix had the rights to continue literally the greatest PC game of all time, but they got squeamish after their own meddling caused their new series not to quite meet their own ridiculous standards, so they got scared and canceled the whole damn shooting match for this garbage. This entire fact pattern makes me so goddamned sick that making and drinking those Dew-Garl-ritas was a pleasant experience in comparison to comprehending the incompetence and the cowardice displayed by the management at Square Enix. Those cowards, those worms. How tragic it must be to know that your own insecurities cause you to cripple and then piss away your own golden goose in exchange for the privilege to make an asinine game of the most asinine intellectual property of our time. Oh god, the dew's taking over. Somebody stop me. Well, at least I got that out of my system. Let's try to be a little more level-headed for the rest of this. For those of you that don't know, Deus Ex is a 2000 immersive sim made by John Romero's Ion Storm, which was produced by game design legend Warren Spector, which had been on multiple occasions voted to be quite literally the best PC game ever. After a sequel that obviously couldn't possibly fill the shoes of its predecessor, and the main team deciding not to renew their contracts, Deus Ex and its intellectual property was in limbo until it got picked up by Square Enix alongside the rights to the Thief series. At the time, Squeenix knew what they had, and they formed Eidos Montreal over in Quebec as a team meant to exclusively make immersive sims. They made Thief, which was kinda meh at best, but they also made Deus Ex Human Revolution, a prequel to the original Deus Ex that knocked it right out of the park and got people interested in immersive and sims again, yours truly included. After Human Revolution's success, the team at Eidos Montreal got right to work on a sequel that might bridge the gap between Human Revolution's 2027 and Deus Ex's 2052. But of course, no good deed goes unpunished, so Squeenix started meddling into the development of Deus Ex. So on top of a PR campaign that was so controversial it hamstringed Human Revolution's sequel, they also insisted that said sequel, Deus Ex Mankind Divided, be split into a two-parter because someone on Square Enix's board of directors probably just got done taking their daughter to Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 2. So on top of the game not having the best launch thanks to contrived pre-order bonuses and some very controversial promotional campaigns causing people unfamiliar to the series to be gun-shy about trying a game that was promoted with a short movie called Mechanical Apartheid, the series got shafted because Deus Ex Mankind Divided ends on a massive cliffhanger, which sets up for a third and final act to tie everything together. But surprise, surprise, thanks to the game having the most embarrassing PR campaign and having literally half of the game cut out for another sequel because Boardroom said so, and a lukewarm reception thanks to those two things, Deus Ex Mankind Divided did not live up to the cartoonishly huge sales expectations that Square Enix set, so Squeenix decided by telling Montreal to put it on the shelf for now while they swore up and down the Thief franchise had moved to a farm upstate where it had lots of room to sneak around and put out torches. But guess what? They were going to work on a new IP over with their friends at Crystal Dynamics. And that's how the final chapter to tie in all the best PC game of all time got canned in order to make this drivel. That is why I am upset about all of this. The worst part is, from what I can see at the end credits, most of Eidos Montreal got sent off to work on level design, which we previously established is really bad, and we have also previously established that the level design in Deus Ex prequels is good. So clearly, this was like grunt work. They were just shifted over to do asinine things for an asinine game that they knew they were better than. So, in summary, Marvel's Avengers is the worst thing to happen to all of video games in 2020 so far, and relies far too heavily on Marvel movie fanboyism to try and hide the fact that there isn't an original idea in its gameplay, and that it's at best an example for future business school textbooks to use about the perils of trying to front-load games as a service onto an overpriced IP. However, this game might be for you if, say, you own a 4-figure sum of Funko Pop things. this game might be for you if you think the phrase, "I love you 3000" was super deep and meaningful. This game might be for you if you're already strategically arranging your comic books on your wall to film a vlog about how I'm just a hater and a DC fanboy who's salty about whatever people in DC are being salty about these days. I kinda checked out after Legends of Tomorrow Season 4. I just got burned out on one too many emotional conversations in hallways and not enough Speed Force fun times and telling people that they failed the city. This game might be for you if you have ever unironically used the word POG or any variant of it out loud in a public conversation. This game might be for you if you harass Sony Pictures employees on any level of business about the Spider-Man rights debacle last year with zero self-awareness or insight into that corporate custody hearing, and you were just upset and panicked that your favorite thing might come out a bit later than you wanted it to. This game might be for you if you think anything Disney has ever done was woke, progressive, or forward-thinking enough to where you had to talk about how excited or proud you were. This game might be for you if you own quote-unquote flair for reasons other than having to wear it for a job such as Hot Topic or TGI Fridays. This game might be for you if, you know what, I'm done with this gag, but I think I've painted a pretty clear picture of if this game is for you or not. So if there's anything we can take away from this, it's that hopefully the crashing and burning of Marvel's Avengers will serve as a lesson to those idiots in the boardroom at Squeenix that no matter what branding you put on crap, people know better than to buy crap when it comes to their entertainment. Your branding cannot carry you through bad product decisions. If anything, there's a silver lining in how 2 months in and it's evident that people have already voted with their wallets and made Marvel's Avengers a commercial failure. And not just by Squeenix's own ridiculous standards. So at this point, I'm sure at least a few of you have seen the PC Gamer article talking about how, according to a Japanese business analyst, Square Enix has posted a 6.5 billion yen loss on what they call HG games, namely driven by Marvel's Avengers. That translates to just a smidge under $50 million in losses based on this one game, and the kicker is that it costs them somewhere between $170 and $190 million just to make this thing. This is hitting them hard in their pocketbook, and especially looking at like what they have to do like with making obligatory DLCs and at least keeping the servers up for like a few more months. Like I'd say they probably are at least contractually obligated to keep the thing running for 6 months or so. I don't think they're gonna close the gap on that loss. I don't think they're gonna break even. I think this is an unmitigated disaster for them. And this is all after the fact also brought up by this guy that apparently Marvel's Avengers only sold 60% of what they were expected to sell. As I said earlier in this video, the inciting incident for me making this entire hell rant of a video was that it came out that Deus Ex Mankind Divided has already surpassed Marvel's Avengers in player count on occasion, despite how long ago that game was released and that it's a single player game versus a live service multiplayer. And I think that we can use that as a means of sending a message. Instead of screaming into the internet void like I have for the last hour or so, or sending angry DMs to some poor salaryman over at Squeenix, how about instead we vote with our analytics and our wallets? I think right now would be a good time for all of us to start playing Deus Ex Mankind Divided again to boost up its numbers and show those MBA numbskulls that there's a market for these games. Sure, it may not hit their own obscene sales goals, but at least they'll be able to get critical acclaim from another Deus Ex title instead of a lot of, well, the story was okay, I guess, while being drowned in a sea of 6 out of 10s. If we do this, they won't be able to use weasel words and jargon to blame the pandemic or political upheaval on their bad game. They'll have to acknowledge that what we want is what we want, and if they want to keep on making money off us, they'll give us what we want, lest we go elsewhere. While I'd like to see the conclusion to the Deus Ex prequels, I won't be hurting for immersive sims without it. Gloomwood and Prepateria are looking pretty good as of late, and as long as there's a demand, there's a market. Now, I know that Eidos Montreal is much better than everything that I've presented in Marvel's Avengers, and while I don't know the works of Crystal Dynamics too well, I get the feeling that what they do is probably at least a few orders of magnitude above this smoldering dumpster fire. Everything in Marvel's Avengers reeks of design by boardroom. Think about it. No game designer in their right mind would just go and cobble together a bunch of elements from a bunch of other popular games that are well past their prime and try to call it a day, while just assuming that trying to put this on a big name IP would carry this game's sales like it was, what, 2004? I would not be surprised if a few years from now we learn from some sort of interview or leak that just about everyone in the brass at either Crystal Dynamics or Eidos was trying to reason with the suits at Squeenix, telling them that this was a bad idea for the property and that they should try to make a game that stands on its own mechanically. That's my own tinfoil hat crap though. I just feel sorry for everyone involved in this game's development, as no matter how you slice this is a bad look for them. Well, this was certainly cathartic, and I want to thank you all so much for listening to me. And if any of this resonated for you in this projectile vomit and video essay word format, feel free to like this video and maybe leave a comment about what you liked. If you didn't like this or what I said in this video, I have a feeling you've already disliked it and you're typing your wall of text about how I'm just a DC hater as we speak. Special thanks to all my $10 patrons: Elise Nera, Bam Bam Toxico, Chili Moon Buns, Damien H, Destitute, French Toast, Graham R, Caleb G, McFluffers, Meme, Niles D, Paul D, Richard H, Schlingding, Shredded Paper Plates, Tor H, William S, Yannick Z, Dead Negator, OMG Ponies, and Spectate. And hello and welcome to new patrons: Alexander K, Van the Cheesin, Alexander R, Lou Mitdropelu, Smolfy, The Strongest Ridley, and Christian B. If you'd like to fight the fight against sketchy sponsorships and in the bargain get access to videos, 4K cat clips, special roles in the Discord channel, and updates about behind the scenes going on, head over to patreon.com/charlatanwonder, where you can get all of this for less than the price of a... You know, that Dew-Garl-rita Code Red is hitting me, and I think I need to go lie down. Enjoy the cat video. Have I awoken you? I'm terribly sorry, that was not my intention. Well, now that you're up, how do you do, Floofin? Look at you in your tower, being a big ball of fluff. I can't touch your little nose, little toes. Yes, I know I have oil on my hands because I was doing a skin treatment. That's right, you just have yourself a nice little nappy. Okay, sorry. Only head scratchies. $99 Frisk.